Hey everybody, we're going to start doing chapters 2 and 3 today. Um, we're going to do the questions together. So I'm just going to go ahead and read chapters 2 and 3 and post the videos up. So chapter 2 of book the third is titled The Grindstone. So before we begin, I want to give you the definition of what the grindstone is. A grindstone is a flat circular stone of sandstone that revolves on an axle and is used for grinding, shaping, or smoothing. If it would help you, you can look up the definition for it, and it shows you a picture of a grindstone so you can see what they're talking about. So I'm going to start now with chapter 2, The Grindstone. Tellson's Bank, established in the Saint-Germain quarter of Paris, was in a wing of a large house, approached by a courtyard and shut off from the street by a high wall and a strong gate. The house belonged to a great nobleman who had lived in it until he made a flight from the troubles in his own cook's dress and got across the borders. A mere beast of the chase, flying from hunters, he was still in his metempsychosis, none other than the same Monsignor, the preparation of whose chocolate for whose lips had once occupied 3 strong men beside the cook in question. So I'm going to stop. So what we find out here is that the place where this chapter takes place is actually in the household of the Monsignor, the guy that we met back in book the second. The title of that chapter, I do believe, is Monsignor in Town. And so it's the guy who had 3 different guys who would bring him his morning chocolate. So he has fled to London, dressed up like his cook, and the metaphor here is a mere beast of the chase flying from his hunters. So just to kind of give you an idea of the way of things right now. So picking it up with Monsignor gone. Monsignor and the 3 strong men absolving themselves from the sin of having drawn his high wages, by being more than ready and willing to cut his throat on the altar of the dawning republic, one and indivisible, of liberty, equality, fraternity, or death, Monsignor's house had been first sequestered and then confiscated. For all things move so fast, and decree followed decree with that fierce precipitation, that now upon the 3rd night of the autumn month of September, patriot emissaries of the law were in possession of Monsignor's house, and had marked it with the tricolor, and were drinking brandy in its state apartments. So the house has been taken over by the revolutionary government, this new government of France, and they're all living there, or having businesses there. A place of business in London, like Tellson's place of business in Paris, would soon have driven the house out of its mind and into the Gazette. For what would staid British responsibility and respectability have said to orange trees and boxes in a bank courtyard, and even to a Cupid over the counter? Yet such things were. Tellson's had whitewashed the Cupid, but he was still to be seen on the ceiling, in the coolest linen, aiming, as he very often does, at money from morning to night. Bankruptcy must inevitably have come of this young pagan in Lombard Street, London, and also of curtained alcove in the rear of the immortal boy, and also of a looking-glass let into the wall, and also of clerks not at all old, who danced in public on the slightest provocation. Yet a French Tellson's couldn't get on with these things exceedingly well, and as long as the times held together, no man had taken fright at them and drawn out his money. What money would be drawn out of Tellson's henceforth, and what would lie there lost and forgotten? What plate and jewels would tarnish in Tellson's hiding places, while the depositors rusted in prisons, and when they should have violently perished? How many accounts with Tellson's, never to be balanced in this world, must be carried over into the next? No man could have said that night any more than Mr. Jarvis Lorry could, though he thought heavily on these questions. He sat by a newly lighted wood fire, the blighted and unfruitful year prematurely cold, and on his honest and courageous face there was a deep shade than the pendant lamp could throw, or any object in the room distortedly reflect, a shade of horror. Okay, so here we remember that Mr. Lorry has gone to Paris in order to help kind of fix everything at Tellson's in Paris, kind of get everything together. And what he's realizing is that there is a lot of money and a lot of goods, precious items, jewelry, antique furniture, antique plates, paintings, things that are going to be stuck in Tellson's care forever, basically, because the people who own them are either in prison waiting to die or have already died. And that is what he is thinking about in this moment. Picking it back up with He occupied. He occupied rooms in the bank in his fidelity to the house of which he had grown to be a part, like strong root ivy. It chanced that they derived a kind of security from the patriotic occupation of the main building, but the true-hearted old gentleman never calculated about that. All such circumstances were indifferent to him, so that he did his duty. On the opposite side of the courtyard, under a colonnade, was extensive standing for carriages, where indeed some carriages of Monseigneur yet stood. Against two of the pillars were fastened two great flaring flambeaux, and in the light of these, standing out in the open air, was a large grindstone, a roughly mounted thing which appeared to have hurriedly been brought there from some neighboring smithy or other workshop. Rising and looking out of a window at this harmless objects, Mr. Lorry shivered and retired to his seat by the fire. He had opened not only the glass window, but the lattice blind outside it, and he had closed both again, and he shivered through his frame. All right, we're going to stop here. The grindstone, like we said at the beginning of this recording, is a stone that's used. It basically spins, and you put metal up against it, and it changes its shape, or it sharpens it, or something like that. Most of the time used for something innocent, something not dangerous. But here they have moved this to the Monsignor's house where revolutionaries gather, and it is not used innocuously. It is used to sharpen weapons. That is its purpose here. And so with Lorry looking out at it and seeing it, he's not seeing this harmless piece of workmanship. What he's seeing is a symbol of death, a symbol of the violence that is going on and is beginning to escalate in Paris. All right, picking it up with From the Streets. From the streets beyond the high wall and the strong gate, there came the usual night hum of the city, with now and then an indescribable ring in it, weird and unearthly, as if some unwonted sounds of a terrible nature were going up to heaven. "Thank God," said Mr. Lorry, clasping his hands, "that no one near and dear to me is in this dreadful town tonight. May He have mercy on all who are in danger." Soon afterwards the bell at the great gate sounded, and he thought, "They have come back," and sat listening. But there was no loud interruption into the courtyard as he had expected, and he heard the gate clash again, and all was quiet. The nervousness and dread that were upon him inspired that vague uneasiness respecting the bank, which a great change would naturally waken, with such feelings roused. It was well guarded, and he got up to go among the trusty people who were watching it, when his door suddenly opened, and two figures rushed in, at sight of which he fell back in amazement. Lucy and her father! Lucy with her arms stretched out to him, and with that old look of earnestness so concentrated and intensified that it seemed as though it had been stamped upon her face expressively to give force and power to it in this one passage of her life. All right, so Dickens kind of sets us up for this. He has, just let me back up just a sec. If you go back a couple of paragraphs, "Thank God," said Mr. Lorry, clasping his hands, "no one near and dear to me is in this dreadful town tonight." And then almost immediately after saying that, there is a knock on the door, and it's Lucy and Dr. Manette. So we have this this information kind of coming out real fast. All right, picking it up with "What is this?" "What is this?" cried Mr. Lorry, breathless and confused. "What is the matter? Lucy, Manette, what has happened? What has brought you here? What is it?"